Alright, everybody, it's that time again where we rank the albums of the band we've been covering for the last little bit here. And of course, that is the short but great discography of the psychedelic prog metal group, Tool. And really, it's kind of hard to put those guys under any genre, but that seems to be kind of the best way I can describe them. But, also, at the end of this video, don't forget we're going to announce the next big discography, and I mean a big one. I like to do these little small ones in between, but we're getting ready for probably I think it's the biggest one that we've looked at yet, that I'm going to be diving into. So, without further ado here, all these albums are great, guys. So, this was really tough ranking these. I love all of these. And number 6, my least favorite of them is actually their debut EP, Opiate. Came out in 1992. And a lot of people may think it's not fair to put EPs in with these, but this holds up as a very strong one. And, another example would be, Slayer's Haunting the Chapel. That holds up, even though it's like 2 or 3 songs, that holds up as a hell of an EP that possibly could beat some of the albums. In this case, this one doesn't beat any of the full-length albums, but, I could see it in some people's rankings, maybe it does. But yeah, you get the really aggressive tone, raw production. Some of my favorite tracks off here, Part of Me is a big one off here for me. My favorite that I always liked, but this one really grew on me. These past, this going through these again. The title track, Opiate, which is really the longest track on here. I love the opener, Sweat, and then Hush. And the 2 live tracks, Jerk Off and Cold and Ugly, those are good or whatever, and it kind of captures some of the band's essence. And those weren't tracks that were ever recorded, like in the studio, that I know of. At least they weren't on any of these albums. And they are good. But I think overall this one does have it is really raw in its production. It's just the band hadn't really found themselves yet. They weren't really anywhere near prog or psychedelic. Really just a straight up like a all heavy metal band, which is awesome. This is a great EP. Definitely ranks up there, as like whenever I think of awesome EPs, this is one of them that comes to mind. Because I mean that's a hell of a way to show what you got. And, like I said, the live tracks, they don't do too much for me. But it's the ones you really, if you're just not want to listen to the whole thing, maybe just, pick like maybe a top 2 or 3 songs. It's definitely Opiate, Part of Me, and Sweat. Those are just incredible. But without, after that, kind of goes right in line here, right in order, with my number 5 being 1993's Undertow, their debut LP that came out, just 1 year after Opiate. And, this one, again, has that really raw and grittiness to it, really heavy. But they added some proggy elements to it, which are great. I love Intolerance. Prison Sex is one of the best Tool songs. Sober, it's a classic. It's definitely one of their biggest hits. It's not one of my favorites off here by any means, but it does have its place on here. It's a good song. Bottom is, oh man, that might be my favorite off here. That or a Swamp Song, I mean, man. And, 4 Degrees, Undertow. There's a lot of good stuff on here. Flood. One of the things I kind of been ranting about, in even like album reviews after I did this one, it's the 15-minute, 47-second long epilogue thing. These guys are known for kind of putting little prologues, interludes, epilogues, all that stuff, and that's awesome. They're great at it usually. But this was not one of those cases. It's just a bunch of noises. It's really annoying, especially, whenever I'm going through to review these, I'm trying to, really experience all of them, including that, and I really didn't even remember that being a thing. But the only redeeming quality of that particular thing is that it falls, like, the track listing, it skips all the way to 69 as track 69, so that's kind of funny. But yeah, overall, incredible album. I've heard this be some people's favorites before, and I totally get where they're coming from. This is Tool, and still in their early ages, and Maynard, just really aggressive vocals. Like I said, top quality stuff, especially with Prison Sex, Bottom, Swamp Song, Intolerance. I mean, those are, and Flood. Those are definitely my favorites off here. Really, really just incredible album. An essential 90s record right here. All right. And this one is definitely going to be probably pretty controversial here, but, you know, and I love it. This was the first Tool album I ever heard, but ranking in at number 4, 1995, or no, it is 96, Enema. You got the eyeballs kind of on there. Again, kind of hard for the camera to pick up, but they're blinking on there. But, yeah, just, wow. This is really the perfect blend of their heaviness and raw feel that, you know, we just talked about on the EP and their first LP, and the progginess and psychedelic nature of this, you know. And tracks like Stink Fist and Eulogy, just some of my favorites. Man, H is a great one. 46 and 2 has got that just beautiful, like, dark and brooding bass tone that Justin Chancellor brings to the table. You know, you have, oh man, the title track, that breakdown. I mean, it's really heavy, you know, it's super heavy going out, and then it just breaks down to hear some of like the prettiest vocals Maynard's ever recorded. So, you know, really, really cool album. I absolutely love this thing. And again, it has a special place, you know, for me sentimentally, because it was my first Tool album I ever heard. You know, and oh man, another one. I'm just thinking of these because I don't have the track listing. Obviously, it's not in the back of here. I had to read it off like a little notepad, you know, in the review. So I'm just kind of thinking these off my head. But yeah, Hooker with a Penis is a funny one, but a really great one. This one has some really kind of entertaining interludes in between the songs. They do it right this time for sure. But yeah, oh man, just track after track on this thing. It's just incredible stuff. I mean, this one is highly regarded as their best album by many, and it used to be my favorite. You know, at one point or another, these top, you know, now that we're already, this is number 4 out of the 6. Yeah. You know, pretty much about the halfway point here, right before the halfway point. With this one and the next 3, all of them have at one point been my favorite. So that tells you how strong this discography of these guys really is, if you're into this kind of stuff. But yeah, Enema, it's a must listen. Talk about essential albums of the 90s, man. Obviously, if in my ranking, if I had to pick one of the 90s Tool albums that are like an essential one, boom, it's Enema. But yeah, incredible album. We'll move on from that one. And man, these top 3, super hard to rank these. So number 3, man, and I had to do some deep thinking. This was just some tough stuff, and but I landed on it here. At number 3 being their most recent album, 2019's Fear Inoculum. And, you know, I said I couldn't find that little charger for the, you know, the little video thing going on in here, but I did find it. It was tucked nicely away inside over here. So yeah, it's got this. I can show off probably one of the most coolest packages they've ever, you know, had for any of their albums. But yeah, then that thing goes on a while. It's pretty kind of spooky. But but anyways, yeah, man, this album, it's really a grower, you know, like, even the first time, it's one of those albums where the more you let it simmer on you and kind of keep listening to it, the more you pick up on some of this stuff that's like, oh man, that is just genius. And some of the very, you know, this one's filled with odd time signatures. Probably the album that has most of their odd time signatures. And you know, I love tracks, you know, in particular, the title track, my God. That whenever that single dropped, the first time I knew, that was a Tool classic. You've got Enema, another really cool, very odd time signature thing that I love. All these tracks are super long. You do have the heavier one, the closer, Tempest, which is one of the best ones off. That's like a 15-minute track, and it's, you know, kind of harkens back to some of that Undertow, Enema, and Opiate era, you know, sound with the really heavy Maynard vocals and stuff. I love Descending. That's a beautiful song. Literally every track on here is just absolutely amazing. But I had to rank it a little bit lower because even this time when revisiting this, I hadn't heard this album in a while before revisiting this. You know, it almost ranked below Enema for me, where in the past it did rank kind of up here. It's been my favorite before, like I said, but the more listens you give this thing, the more it grows on you, and you really begin to appreciate what it is. This album was at one point supposed to be just like I said in the review for it, just a one giant long song, and you can really tell that here, which is not a bad thing. It's really cool that the flow on this album is perfect. Like there's even the riffs and some of the parts, and some of the licks are similar enough to where they could all be one song. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Like I said, I think that's really cool, because it doesn't get repetitive. So they really just did a masterful job on this thing. But like I said, it does rank below the next two because, it does take more listens to really get a true appreciation for. But I'm at that point, obviously, at this stage, of owning this album after it's a couple years after its release, and I absolutely love it. It holds up today. All right, guys. My number 2, and this was, again, a tough call here. But we're looking at 10,000 Days. Man, oh man. I'm not really going to be showing off like a lot of the artwork stuff like I did in the individual reviews, and kind of really went in depth more and showed the artwork and such on the albums. But, man, 10,000 Days, just what an album. Oh, man. From the moment you hear like the kind of, creepy, tone that Vicarious brings to the table, and then just jumps into that heavy riff, man. And that's a heavy song, kind of the whispering vocals Maynard's got going on during those verses. I love John By, one of my favorite bass lines Justin Chancellor's ever done. You got the incredible 2-part track of Wings for Mary and 10,000 Days about Maynard's mother with cancer. That's beautiful, gives me goosebumps. Especially listening to that thing all the way through, man. Oh, it's incredible. Rosetta Stone grew on me after, several years of not really fully, kind of like I always liked it, but it was never like up near the top, like on my radar. But man, after this most recent re-listen going through these, I was like, man, I get that track now. That's where it's at. You've got The Pot, which is just such a groove to it, man. Incredible riff and flow of lyrics. And melodies going on there. That's just super badass. One of the most badass tracks I've ever done. Then you've got, of course, Right Into, which is really kind of a pretty, more ballady type song, but it's just incredible. And just such a great album, loaded with stuff. And I still stand by this being Adam Jones's best guitar tone on any of these albums. It's just so freaking heavy. And, like, it's got a crunch to it that I really like. But, yeah. Just a masterful album, again, by these guys. Came out in 2006. And this would be the last album, from them. For, 13 years. So this is kind of what we had for a while. For a long while was the last thing we were left with, which wasn't a bad thing. They left us with some great stuff there for that long 13 years before Fear Inoculum. But yeah, this was more than enough to suffice for that, because this album is a freaking masterpiece. And this is even my brother's favorite, my younger brother's favorite, and I totally get where he's coming from. All right, guys, number 1. If you've been doing Process of Elimination, you already know. This one has definitely stayed throughout. It was really everything below this one that was really hard. This one had even after re-listening and going through these again, cemented itself even further. And for my number 1, Lateralis. And man, oh man, it's just such an incredible album. Oh, had something go off here on my phone. There we go. But you talk about masterpiece and the flow. Take that flow of Fear Inoculum and, the interludes with those sprinkled in there. Take that, it just makes just this incredible piece of art. Not even counting just the album art on this thing. That's really cool. But, like I said in the review for this, tracks like Parable and Parabola, Parable only being like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, is like the intro to Parabola. Those have to go together for me. I can't listen to Parabola without Parable. That's how good the interludes were in this. And the same with Mantra and the Patient, or sorry, that Mantra went before Schism. Eon Blue Apocalypse and the Patient. You know, all this stuff. It's just mapped out perfectly, and you've again got just even heavy hitters on here like Ticks and Leeches, which is just, it reminds me a lot of a Rosetta Stone actually off 10,000 Days. But Parabola and Parable of Parabola is probably my favorite Tool song of all time. Those two, like, it's just the way, it's so beautiful, that song is, and the way it goes. You have the epic Lateralis, that's, you know, the title track, that it's, the rhythm of it's formed, and the melody's formed off of the Fibonacci sequence, which is just super cool and you know, ingenious. The opener, The Grudge, kicks you right into gear with heavy. Think it's gonna, you know, be just a fast-paced, short, heavy song. It just keeps going. The biggest track off here, biggest hit off here, Schism. Man, even that one, that bass line, come on, that's iconic. One of the, you know, one of the first bass lines, you know, a lot of bass players learned, me included. But yeah, and you know, even some of the more just hypnotic and, you know, very mellow tracks like Reflection, man, just the stuff is just incredible. And Disposition, it's just, man, it even ends cool with an epilogue that kind of, if you're into like the aliens, you know, conspiracy theory stuff, it kind of gets a radio excerpt from something from that. You know, I don't really, no need to really go on it all into that, but you know what I'm talking about if you've read up on some of that stuff. But just this album is a pure masterpiece. This is more than likely the album I go back to most. If I'm thinking of jamming a Tool, I know I can pop this thing at any time, because it's kind of like comparing it to Fear Inoculum again, because I think they have a lot in common with, you know, the whole flow, and, you know, I could even hear this thing being possibly one whole song. I don't think that was, I've never heard of that being the plan for this thing or anything, but I'm just saying they both kind of have that in common and flow very well. But you see, unlike Fear Inoculum, this one, the tracks stand still, you know, by themselves better, I think, to where, you know, if I'm just like, oh, I want to pop on Schism, or I want to pop on, you know, The Grudge or something like that, or any of them off here, you know, you're going to have an easier time getting into it, whereas I think Fear Inoculum is really best listened to just front to back all the way through. And I think that about most albums, but I'm just saying, like, maybe for casual listening, you know, if I'm just running to the store real quick, you're going to, you know, I'm more than likely going to want to pop on something that's a little, you know, that you're not going to have to sit down and just get into, like with Fear Inoculum, that, you know, it takes, I'm trying to, because I'm not trying to take away from Fear Inoculum or anything, or even say that this one doesn't quite encompass you or get you drawn into it as much as Fear Inoculum, because I think this does more so. I'm just saying that these tracks stand. The beauty of this is that it both flows perfectly and stands perfectly as a whole and as individuals. So yeah, that's really what I'm trying to say. Sorry about the rant there. I just was thinking about that, comparing those two earlier. But yeah, there you have it, guys. We've ranked and reviewed all the Tool albums. Hopefully we get a new, you know, single dropping soon. It happened with the Maiden, during the Maiden discography review, and, you know, but hopefully we get something, you know, even from a Perfect Circle or any of the Maynard bands, Pussifer, here soon. I mean, I know it's probably a lot to ask since it was, you know, only 2 years ago that Fear Inoculum came out, but who knows? But with all that being said, guys, the next band we are covering, it is a big one. We're talking, like, I think 19 albums. The founders, what many call the founders of heavy metal, and I call it Black freaking Sabbath, who, you know, what a colorful discography those guys have. Man, oh, there's so many eras and just different albums. Each of those albums sound totally different. So I'm super excited to be diving into one of my favorite bands' discographies coming up. So yeah, next time, what that means is we're going to look at the, you know, again, the founding fathers of metal, Black Sabbath, and that debut LP, the self-titled. And just what a wicked noise. You know, super cool stuff that we're going to be delving into. And that, you know, as long as discography as that is, you know, just like the Maiden one we took up, you know, a good month or so, maybe even more. This one's going to do about the same, but I don't care. I'm ready. Bring on the Sabbath. But anyways, thanks, guys. I would love to hear your guys' rankings and opinions on my rankings, because that's the super fun thing about this, is that everybody, you know, has different opinions. Sometimes you'll find somebody that just matches perfect with yours, which that's cool too. But what's really interesting too, you know, if somebody's got, you know, Opie at the EP at the top, wow, that's awesome. You know, that would be kind of shocking to me, and I'd love to hear why. But yeah, stay tuned for the Sabbath stuff. I know there's a lot of Sabbath fans out here. You know, probably a lot more Sabbath fans that were kind of lurking on my channel than there were Tool fans, because, you know, I've seen the most of my views come from like just the straight up heavy metal, like Sabbath, Maiden, and Dio, and Priest, and all that stuff. But despite all that, we're going to be digging into some Sabbath soon. So thanks, guys. Like, comment, and subscribe.